Bonjour, good morning. From the beginning of this lecture, I would like to say that I won't speak in favor or against liberalism. I will just describe it as it is, as a state, as a point of view, as a tool. You see, liberalism and interventionism is actually crucial to describe the purpose of existence, the idea of great happiness. So, philosophy rightly made a great deal out of that. My intention is to give you food for thought, and that means that everything that I state mean to be not subjective ideas, but objective facts. So, we will try to define social behaviors, politics, and make a way of living through the idea of liberalism. By referring to liberty, we actually refer to freedom of choice. We should make a distinction here because it's a common failure to think that freedom of choice is identical to free will. When we refer to freedom of choice, we actually, freedom of choice applies in order to different people in the same circumstances, or the same people in different circumstances would be able to make different choices, and by choosing, restraining their freedom. So, when we're actually referring to freedom of choice, it's not like someone could make a different choice in the same circumstances. Rather, we manufacture a field in which different people can express themselves. On the other hand, when you refer to free will, it's something totally different. Free will has to do with the cause behind the causal. If there is a cause behind each causal, then you have a deterministic environment in which every time the same causes will lead to the same result. So, if there is a cause behind this causal, if we accept that science and every scientific research is trying to find these causes, and it's not like statistics, then we see that we have a deterministic character of the environment. And every time that we can, if we have a systematic approach, and we know all the parameters in this environment, in this system, if we can know all the parameters in there, and we can know all the forces which apply in this system, that are applied in this system, then if we make the correct calculations, we can know the result, we can know the forthcoming situation. And then if we put this as feedback, then we get all the forthcoming situations. So we see that actually, from the beginning to the end, to infinitely, or to the destruction of the system, then everything is prescribed, is predetermined. We would be able to know everything if we say that a human and all the factors that make his decisions are in a closed system, in a system that doesn't, that only has, if you say that in a system that it's closed and doesn't have other reflects from the environment, then if you know all the factors, and then you know that under these circumstances, the system will give this result. He will make this choice because of these factors. So you know his choice, and if you put this as feedback, then you know his next choice and the next choice. So if we make the assumption that there is a unit that could know all that had all the knowledge, could have all the data, and the computing capacity to manage them, that would yield as information all the future states of this human being, of the system. proving that it's predetermined. Therefore, actually humans have the freedom of choice, but their choices are predetermined, based on the factors that are shaping them.
Sorry, the choices are?
The choices are predetermined.
Predetermined?
Yeah. Based on the factors that are shaping them. We are just incapable of understanding that. Sometimes we have the illusion that we can cheat on nature's laws, that we can bend them, that we can overcome them. But on the contrary, we actually accomplish everything just by taking advantage of them. The laws of nature are above us. They were here from the beginning and will be there. They will be here to the end. They are actually, everything is made out of them and according to them. And they have no mean intentions or cruel intentions or kind intentions. They just exist. They form a field in which we are free to do everything possible, but they have predetermined it. So they actually shape the greater plan, which apparently includes us for now, but it doesn't mean that it's built around us. And they don't subject to teleology. Science is the vehicle of human to try to explore them, to try to find the truth. But as Goethe said with the incompleteness theory, if you are inside the system, in a strong system, there will always be things that you won't be able to prove. And that's where believing starts. So, as much as I'm concerned, nature of laws of nature, is the projection of the cause that created this world. And free will is like a unicorn. We all like to think about it, but we know that it doesn't exist. Liberalism is a term that is used wisely instead of liberty, because liberty can only exist self-constrained and only defined by a frame. Pure and unconstrained freedom is an utopia. It's beyond imagination. So liberalism actually imprints the effort which leads in states of less constraints. In order to talk about this tendency, we must first of all explore the factors that constrain liberty, as well as the frames in which it can be applied. We are all living creatures. As living creatures, as humans, which are the factors that set our limits? Which are the factors that force us constraints? We are bounded by laws of nature, which result in our needs and our capabilities. We need to feed because we consume energy. We need to sleep because we have to rest. We need to regulate our temperature because our structure can only survive under certain circumstances. We don't have wings in order to fly autonomously. We can't breathe underwater. That is because we are bounded in our existence, in our body with its limited abilities and its given needs. We don't examine where these limits are or how far they can extend, but the fact that they exist and we cannot surpass them. So, this is the reason why unconstrained liberty doesn't exist. We're manufacturing tools to help us extend our limits. People use airplanes to fly, travel underwater, walk on the moon, and yet we are limited to where our tools can get us. Even if I accept the assumption that in depth of time, mankind could create anything we can imagine, we will still be bounded by our imagination. It is just like we stare at the horizon above the sea. So actually we feel that our view is obstacle-free when the horizon itself is the one that limits our vision. Imagination is the field with the most degrees. We're free to think whatever we want. But we must be blind enough to think that our imagination doesn't have limits. Our dreams and our imagination is a projection of our experiences, our hopes. They get feedback from what we see, what we feel, and depend on our ability to extend our perception. It offers the feeling of a bottomless well. But that's only because we cannot possibly know what we could have imagined if the filters set by our religion, our beliefs, our surroundings, our environment, our family, our experiences were altered. We can only state for sure that our imagination would be different. As humans, we form and live in societies. In this frame, new strings are attached, new boundaries, new constraints arise. Written and unwritten laws. In order to coexist, we set a formula of obligations and rights, legislature. In order to function coordinated and to similarly serve our interests, governmental power is applied. We need to feel comfortable with what we don't apprehend. We need hope, so we build religions and we subject to superstitions. We follow traditions and customs in order to serve our culture and feel integrated to the continuity of the ages. We need to fit in and to be approved by the society, so ethics arise, rules of conduct that set our behavior. We keep up with trends and artificial fashions promoted by idols that should reflect the status of success. In order to communicate with each other, we match meanings with sounds. We manufacture gestures. Given that we want to be understood, are we free to make any sound that we want to express ourselves? Are we bounded to where our tools can get us? We build new means of expression, or we import innovative elements in the already existing in order to extend them. But is the freedom of expression totally free, or is it self-constrained by its means and the comprehension of the receivers? Can someone play music without structure, melody, rhythm, tempo? Can someone talk or write without syntax, vocabulary, grammar? Or is it obligatory to comply with certain dictates? Some of these sectors of society overlap or bind with each other, but each of them, inevitably, all of them, are governed by and govern its subject with rules. They set constraints which we will have to deal with. Now, naturally, the question arises, why are there rules? Do people need something to guide them? Or maybe we could handle them in certain circumstances.
What was the sentence word?
Or we could manage without it under certain circumstances. How could we act beyond laws and rules? We have, of course, to separate natural laws, which are above us, and laws that people force to each other in order to serve certain purposes. Manufactured laws, manufactured by humans, are there to spare us from the cost of choice. Because making the right choice poses a great deal of effort and demands a great deal of stress. Nature tries to not to spare energy, not to spare resources. It's the principle of minimum energy, the second law of thermodynamics, that imprints the tendency of every system to reach its equilibrium. It's the principle of inertia that Galileo first stated and Newton confirmed with his first law, that showed that all systems tend to hold their current situation. And constantly we have to put in some energy in order to keep it unstable. So, equilibrium is a nature's code, but we cannot overlook the fact that evolution comes through instability. Freedom demands a constant spend of resources. People that have the spare resources choose to be as free as the resources can get them. And people which have lack of them choose to have the illusion of liberty, which we all need, even if we're up against, even if we're up with it or not. Rules are applied to cover the lack of understanding and are produced through the accumulation of knowledge through the ages. They are supposed to cover the cultural deficit and lack of values. Imagine that you are standing in front of traffic lights. It's 4 o'clock in the morning, you're sober, you are near your neighborhood. You have a red light that prevents you from crossing the road. But there is no one else's will there nearby to conflict with yours. If you can understand the purpose of the specific traffic lights, if you own the spirit of the law, the purpose that the law serves, and you are not in conflict with it, can you bypass? It is really difficult to be confident that you have calculated the impact of your actions short and long term. And it needs a great amount of energy to criticize and reflect on everything, so we are as free as we can, depending on how good our perception is and how we distribute our resources. But be careful. It is common to overestimate our abilities or underestimate the cause that we are up against. If you are foxy enough and you find a way to evade taxes, you gain a short-term amount of money. But have you calculated adequately the impact of your actions? You undermine the state revenues, and as a result, the public healthcare, the public education system, the public educational system, the social benefits. In long term, this will crack the social cohesion and will actually cost you more than you have gained. It's a higher level thinking is required to comprehend that your personal interest most of the times is served better through the common interest. As I stated from the beginning, liberalism is neither good nor bad. It's a tool, it's a point of view. We should handle it depending on our capabilities. People following the rules are as useful as people that criticize them. What would a coach of a football team do or be without his football players? What would a theatre director be without his actors? And now we come to the very crucial point in which we must decide. If we are not guided based on rules, where should we be based on? How should we decide? Laws are temporary. They define and are defined by each society. They are linked with the ethics and try to handle upcoming situations. They either try to prevent or punish, and as a result, legislation, like it or not, is an art. Law is no science and is not driven by stable principles. Think, in the past 14,000 years of mankind, how many different ethics, how many different religions, how many different societies did it come and go? What used to be unethical now is a trend. The law of jungle that prevailed now is claimed to be savage. We lived on trees, we moved into caves. We formed societies, we experienced great wars and disasters. We came through periods of enlightenment and obscurantism. We made crusades, we had slaves, and at a point, we decided to assign human rights, as it didn't come through the united human nature. We assigned them in order to be able to threaten to take them back. And women, at that point, had the right to vote. They were free. So, there are so many contradictions in all of them according to the ethics of the time. Authority and laws reflect the current right thing to do and should have as a purpose to interpret, to realize, and to embody certain values to human societies. If we were able to stand on the constant values that laws mean to interpret, if we found the spirit that lies in the values which are behind legislation, and we set them as a guide, are we not above the laws? Are we not free to surpass them? Are we not acting as the law should dictate. This is what liberalism is about. An example of recent history, and probably familiar to most of you, would be the one of Philippe Pétain and Jean Moulin. Marshal Pétain had an outstanding military leadership during the First World War, which made him national hero. During the Second World War, and facing the upcoming defeat of France in June 1940, he was appointed Premier of France and Chief of the State of Vichy. So as the authority, he chose to comply with Nazism, which embodies the disregard of human life. At this time, that Jean Moulin decided to stand up against the Germans, he set himself above the laws. He was arrested in June 1940, and he tried to commit suicide, cutting his throat with a piece of glass. This shows that the burden of his choice was over his head at the time. But despite this fact, he chose to make a stand. He was the one that united the French resistance in the name of Charles de Gaulle, and he was betrayed, arrested, and tortured to death by Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Lyon, the head of Gestapo. And despite this fact, he never revealed anything to his captors. A World War hero, a marshal, embodies the authority and betrays the value of freedom and human life. A defrighted man that initially almost killed himself proves courage, sticking loyal to his value. There is a great contradiction. The moment that Pétain surrenders to the Nazi and Charles de Gaulle declares, the resistance continues, we don't follow government's orders. He is against the law. He is a traitor. He will probably face court-martial. He would face death penalty. And after World War, Charles de Gaulle is the authority. And Marshal Pétain is a traitor. And Charles de Gaulle spares his life. His former protégé. So, as you can see, laws and authorities change. You can be held responsible for treason for your actions, and because of them, at the next time you might be the authority yourself. But Charles de Gaulle and Jean Moulin stick to the value of liberty and human life, no matter how they were regarded facing the law. They were both free men, while many of the charges against Klaus Barbie were dropped thanks to the legislation that protected people accused of crimes under the Vichy regime. So here comes the big question. Could the authorities ever be abolished? Could we ever live without laws? We already demonstrated the huge amounts of energy that are needed in order to be free, the huge burden that we have to carry. We accepted the fact that there is a lack of culture and that laws apply to cover the lack of understanding while they accumulate knowledge. Every one of us is as free as he can be, as free as his resources can get him. Considering that will always be necessary, but don't feel comfortable under their cover. We have to realize that legislation is an art, is altering according to the society, which is temporary, while values are constant and apply to humanity. What we need to do is to make the laws become as identical to our values as possible, by serving them as well as they can. This is their purpose, to interpret these values to a constantly changing society. The best government is the one that won't have to do anything. But this presupposes two things. First of all, that everything will work perfectly through self-management and auto-correction. And secondly, that there is a government. There won't be any gap for someone to cover. There are things also of common interest that could subject to central management, as public works, infrastructure, common benefits, and last but not least, we have to ensure safety, which is one of the greater goods. But which are the values on which we should be based on? Which should our compass be? One of the first values recognized was justice. Homer, the epic ancient Greek poet, wrote Iliad about 850 BC and symbolized justice with Ilios, which is the Greek word of sun, and impersonated through Achilles. Far too many years ago, in ancient Athens, in ancient Greece, the first democracy was established in order the first state of justice to be built. Earlier, Pythagoras, one of the greatest mathematicians, said, "It seems that justice is a square, in all parts equal and identical. Just is anything that applies in the same way to everyone, with no distinctions or exceptions. Justice means that you respect the others as if they were yourself. Justice means that you take full responsibility of your actions, no matter what the consequences are, positive or negative. Even for those who don't believe that there is an objective principle of justice, mandatorily accepted, there is an intersubjective sense of justice in everyone. And out of justice came liberty, liberty itself as a value. There are innumerable examples of nations struggling their way to freedom. Enlightenment came to structure liberalism, and Immanuel Kant came to prove that the only objective higher principle of pure reason that can be experienced is freedom. Enlightenment resulted in the French Revolution in 1789 with the demand of liberté, égalité, fraternité. And the French Revolution showed the way for the revolution in Spain, Italy, and Greece. Not to mention equality as a principle value, but beware. Equality is a resultant of our universal human nature, and we are equal in the level of the rights that stem out of this nature. It is common failure to equality to turn into identity. Identity is a big bulldozer that smashes your diversity. And out of the blue, you become replaceable and disposable, something that leads with mathematical precision to Stalin and Mao. You might end up in the completely opposite of liberty. And as far as liberalism is concerned, justice is over equality, precisely for the fact that we demonstrated before. Everyone can be as free as his perception and his stamina can get him. The set of principles that could structure a liberal society on a stable foundation is humanism. And such a group of principles is necessary because it sets an a priori purpose which pushes the society to teleology. A bunch of bricks is just a bunch of bricks. But if you add purpose, they might become a house. It's the purpose that puts the structure in there. A society with no constraints, that is not based in moral values, will not be liberal. It will be just flooded with impunity. And an example of impunity is demonstrated in several aspects of Christianity, where the experiment of liberalism has led to unconstrained drug dealing. In philosophy, liberalism is expressed mainly in recent times by existentialism. So Jean-Paul Sartre summarized Søren Kierkegaard's teaching in a quote: "Existence precedes essence." The existence has no inherent static properties, unlike substance, but is perpetually shaped by personal action. So everyone is responsible for his evolution. Jean-Paul Sartre, as much as Kierkegaard, insists that there is no external benchmark according to which man should be oriented. His guide is only himself, and he has to create his rules. Consequently, opposite to the command of the society, self-determination or behavior as an act of freedom is something inescapable for humans, which are not allowed to find any other sources of self-determination. Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus dealt with the aspects of human situation, including that of absolute freedom. According to Sartre's words, man is condemned to be free. Condemned because he didn't create his own self, and yet also free because once he came to this world, he is responsible for his actions. Act as you would like all the humanity to do. On the other hand, Camus, influenced by Immanuel Kant, tried to introduce an imperative that demands respect for human dignity, even in a universe bare from any meaning, even if there is no higher reason to govern, even in absurd. There are numerous philosophers and writers that defended freedom besides Immanuel Kant, Sartre, Camus, and Kierkegaard. Nietzsche's Supermensch is a representative exhibit of liberty, in which he defined the nature of his existence. Also, Simone de Beauvoir had a great contribution in integrating existentialism and freedom with feminism. Other important intellectuals that contributed with their thought to liberty were Martin Heidegger, Fyodor Dostoevsky, and Franz Kafka, while the inscription on the Greek scholars Nikos Kazantzakis' grave can summarize freedom in a few words. I hope for nothing, I fear nothing, I am free. And let me remind you that Nikos Kazantzakis lost the Nobel Prize for Literature from Albert Camus for one vote in 1957. Considering politics as a superset of economy and wealth distribution, it can easily be understood that the liberalism applies there as well. This field is divided in two major sectors, capitalism and socialism, and freedom applies in both. Starting from the socialistic field, we recognize the ultimate interventionism in communism, as it is described by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels in the Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital, and the absolute liberty in anarchy, as it is presented by Joseph Proudhon and Piotr Kropotkin. Anarchy is a word derived from the Greek language, alone, and in Greek is formed by the privative a, which expresses negation or absence, and the word archi, which means authority. So anarchy denotes the absence of authorities. The major idea on which this concept is structured is that everyone is free, is entitled to access the amount of resources that he needs, and combining them with the expertise needed, he would be free to express through labor, and he could gain out of it and do whatever he wants with the products that he produces. So people would be free to collaborate if this didn't suppress them, and would have the right to take part equally in all the levels of production line, from management to labor, and from earning to spending. The cardinal virtue in this occasion is self-management. On the other hand, as Kropotkin himself admitted, the fact that resources are limited forces principled values in their distribution. So anarchy is claimed to be an utopia due to lack of resources, exactly as freedom. Furthermore, it is doubtful if self-managed structure could handle the specialization in expertise that is demanded from the constantly larger scale projects. Interventionism promises to ensure better coordination and as a result greater performance in absolute numbers, with the trade-off of suppression to its societies. In the name of equality, abolishes a certain fact, our diversity. On the other hand, liberalism leads to constant mental alertness in opposition to the complacent and dullness and lack of judgment of communistic societies. Our choice depends on our principles, whether we think that living worth more than surviving. Whether we prefer Asterix and the Gauls over the Strumpfs and the Papastrumpf. In the contrary of socialism, in the capitalistic field, labor is not the only thing that is considered as property, but also novelty and entrepreneurial. That means that innovative ideas could be rewarded for the surplus value of labor. Classical liberalism is a philosophy committed to the idea of limited government, liberty of individuals, including freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, and free markets. It was developed in the 19th century mainly by David Ricardo, although it drew on economics of Adam Smith, which was a social understanding of individual liberty, natural law, utilitarianism, and the belief in progress. The central virtue behind this theory is that you produce a good that covers some needs. The more essential is, the more people will pay for it. So the lower the surplus value need to be in order to make a profit. So essential products tend to have values near their cost of production, while luxury products are overpriced. If someone chooses to raise the prices of the essential products to force consumers to pay more in order to cover their need, he will lose, since his competitor will provide the same product at lower prices and will attract all the customers. So actually, the market is self-regulated in the balance point set by the law of supply and demand, which maximizes the gain for both sides, consumers and traders. On the other hand, interventionism regulates the markets either by establishing monopolies, which tend to raise the prices, since the consumers will be obligated to pay if they want to cover their need, or by fixing low prices for products, making them unprofitable, and consequently, producers are unwilling to produce them. Do we live in a universally liberal society? Liberal capitalism is not just about the absence of law to regulate the market. It is about freedom of individuality, freedom of speech, freedom in information access, freedom of self-determination. When you drill violence with army forces and you establish dictatorships to control whole nations and continents in order to have cheap labor, when you force people in starvation so that you can minimize the cost of production, that doesn't make you liberal. This is the exact opposite. This is intervention and leads to manipulation, lower prices, and overconsumption. So a nation must either willingly starve its citizens or exploit other nations in order to be competitive. Even in the European Union, nations with more wealth and stronger economies deliberately imposed loans on smaller countries in order to maintain debts which could use later to put pressure on them to impose lower salaries, so that they could build a comforting industrial area closer to them. Intervention doesn't stop there. When there is an effort of deliberate destabilization of the common currency by individual countries in order to promote their exports, this is called regulation. It is not wise, though, to play games with the markets, because speculators will take the snowflake and turn it into the snowfall. As I stated earlier, it needs a higher level of thinking to understand that most of the times your personal interest is served better through the common one. And now we are in the middle of the economic crisis. Finally, to end up with, we have to point out an unbreakable bond between freedom and great happiness. We seek to conquer high peaks, and when we've made it, we discover higher peaks from there. And once we've made it to the higher peak, to the highest peak, we find out that all this time we were under the stars. The difficulty and the effort that we spent in order to achieve our goals, these objectives, is the ingredient of happiness. Recognizing the trouble and the resources we invested, we recognize and the true value of our goal. It is the cost that we paid in order to fulfill our unsatisfied feeling that comes as a reward. From this point of view, everyone has a right to pursue of happiness, since every individual is free to define his own subjective goals and have meaning to him and try to achieve them. The experience of happiness, though, is rare in our days, and that has not much to do with the difficult nature of happiness as much as the incorrect choice of goals. We are part of a society which willingly and unwillingly pushes us to embrace its own goals, using role models, setting the trend, and the appropriate styles of living. We comply with the desires that we inherit from our social environment, and we are chasing the American dream. At a point that, as an objective, is fictional and doesn't represent our needs. So even if we manage to achieve the goals set by the society, the hollowness that comes as a consequence is not of the same magnitude as the effort that we make, simply because the target didn't express our will. Therefore, the most essential part in the pursuit of happiness is the beginning, the definition of the objectives, keeping in mind that they might have to rearrange in the process. A false initial choice puts us on a path that brings no clearance. So it's profound that being free from the society's demand is essential in order to achieve great happiness. So the thing that most of the people think that is given, the goal of their life, is what will eventually bring or bereave happiness. The society is a ritual, a method, to serve our internal tendency that put us in a procedure to explore, to learn, to evolve. And this tendency of humans is actually an effort to expand the island of their freedom. It is nothing wrong to be part of the society, but it's all wrong to let it own you. Here today, I didn't give you anything more than a different point of view. I practically gave you nothing. But sometimes nothing is everything. The future, like everything else, is open and at the same time closed. Prescribed, but is yet too late. Where you stand is up to you. Please.
You said about, when you talk about the free will, is it an exist that it was predetermined, I think you did. No, do you mean that in that case that the future is completely set, like you know exactly how everything's going to look in 200 years? So
No. It's different. It's one thing to be predetermined, and it's another thing to know.
Yes, sorry, I wrong.
It is predetermined, but we don't know. That's why the future is in the same time closed and open. It's open for us because we are inside the system and we don't know, but it's actually predetermined. If someone knew your thoughts at this point, could actually know what you're going to do. Imagine a big lottery with balls, so that you try to find the number that will come out of it. So you think that, okay, it's pure luck. But if you knew all the forces that were applied in there, the angles, the speeds, the weights, everything, wouldn't you know the outcome? So you see, it's predetermined. It's just a lack of knowledge that you have and you think that it's pure luck. Possibilities in mathematics is just an instrument so that we can handle with what we don't know. They don't exist. It's not like, okay, here is a possibility. It's not an object. It's not even it's not even an idea. It's a tool. If I have 3 cards and there is an ace in one of these 3 cards, so I know where the ace is, and you don't know. You think that there is a 33% of possibility to be in each one. But I know that it's in the middle one, so there is no possibility. It's 100. But you just try to manipulate the lack of knowledge that you have. So actually, if there was a unit that was here from the beginning, so that could summarize all the information and had the capacity, the computing capacity, to figure out what is going on, would get actually the next step, the next state, and put this as feedback, and so the next one, and the next one, and the next one, infinitely, or until the system would crash. So actually, you see that everything is predetermined, but it doesn't mean that there is a goal or a purpose that includes us, or we can just sit and do nothing and everything will happen. Because we don't know what is prescribed. Maybe what I say today here will trigger in your mind something like, okay, maybe if everything is predetermined, we should just do nothing. Or maybe it should trigger the exact opposite. So, if everything is predetermined and I have a future ahead of me which is brilliant, okay, I will struggle. It's just predetermined. You cannot know about it.
For me, what I missed a little bit with many also because I was tired again, it's when you said the cost determine like the happiness or whatever the goal is, then for me it was a little bit quick then.
Okay,
You said you have to start to put things on the start.
Yes. You see, when you seek for great happiness, you say, I put goals on my mind and try to struggle for them. And the time that you reach the goals, you are in instability and you try to reach the goals so that you will be in equilibrium. You feel fulfillment, a wholeness. You feel whole. You feel like everything is perfect. And this is great happiness. So, the effort that you put to reach at this point, at this peak, is actually what the ingredient of happiness, is what brings you this happiness. So, if you have from the beginning wrong goals, that not wrong objectively, okay, this is wrong. Subjectively, if you are not expressed through this goal, then even if you actually catch your goal, if you actually try and manage to get there, you won't feel the wholeness because it wasn't your goal. You didn't actually want to do this. Society said, okay, you must do that. Your mother said, no, you have to be an architect. No, you have to be a doctor. No, you have to be... But you don't like this. Then you are in a life, in a whole life, like 30, 40, 50 years, that you work on something that you don't like. This is condemnation. This is not happiness. You will never find a clearance through this path.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.